Throughout periods 1 and 2, the world was transformed from nomadic hunters and gatherers to settled villages to true civilization as the use of agriculture spread. This section will focus on the evolution of political structures throughout the world. To be considered a civilization, they must have advanced cities, advanced technology, skilled workers, complex institution, and a system of writing or record keeping. The necessity for irrigation caused all early civilizations to form, and the start of civilization began with 4 major early river valley civilizations. Mesopotamia had the earliest civilization, the Sumerian civilization, in around 3500 BCE. Sumer used city-states to form their government, and competing city-states as well as little natural protection from invasion led to the eventual fall of Sumer. After the fall, many different rulers followed, one of which was the Babylonian king Hammurabi, who created a code of law that has a lasting impact with the idea of an eye for an eye. The second river valley civilization that was developed was in the valley of the Nile River in around 3000 BCE. Contrasting to Mesopotamia, Egypt was far more centralized in their government with a king or pharaoh who ruled through divine right and used regional leaders to enforce power. The early river valley in Egypt is split into 3 time periods, the Old, Middle, and New, with the New being the peak but stability all throughout. Egypt was protected by deserts that allowed for less invasion, however there were still many different rules over time. By 2500 BCE, a third civilization emerged along the Indus River, present-day Pakistan. Little is known about the structure, however historians assume that it was highly centralized due to its organized layout and complex institutions like running water. Its fall is partially attributed to natural disaster, although it was already in decline. The last and most isolated of the 4 major river valley civilizations was the Shang and Honghe Valley, present-day China. They used centralized rule, though through an empire to control flooding and irrigation. The Shang were defeated by the Zhou, who created the idea of a mandate of heaven choosing Chinese rulers. Beyond the river valley civilizations, later civilizations in the Americas and around the Mediterranean Sea also rose around this time, and the geography and lack of large animals in Mesoamerica civilizations prevented centralized government from developing. The Hebrews off the coast of the Mediterranean Sea were a theocracy, and they were ruled through Jewish religion until around 1000 BCE. River valley civilizations all developed the idea of having a larger and more complex political system. Following early river valley civilizations were the classical civilizations that had an influence over an even larger group of people. The rise of classical civilization marks a shift from the first period to the second. The mandate of heaven continued in China as stated before, with the Zhou Empire from 1029 to 258 BCE, who had empires that were sons of heaven. They farther centralized the government and expanded territory. Following an era of warring states was the Qin dynasty from 221 to 202 BCE. To govern this ever-increasing and diverse empire, they standardized things like written language and weight. The Han dynasty replaced them from 200 to 220 BCE, which grew in bureaucracy and the use of civil service in China. As well, government became more involved with things like iron production and canals. Overall, these 3 dynasties grew Chinese territory and advanced the government system as it grew more centralized and complex. And around 600 BCE, northern India was split into 16 separate states. By 322 BCE, the Mauryan dynasty was the first to unify most of India and created a large bureaucracy. Rule spread Buddhism, creating unity, but the unity did not last. In 320 CE, the Gupta Empire had begun, and this was a golden age in Indian history. The Hindu rule was less centralized and allowed local rulers to hold power as long as they gave ultimate authority to the Guptas. The lack of unity throughout India eventually fragmented the Gupta Empire, however. The classical civilizations of the Mediterranean developed government in a way that had never been seen before in both Rome and Greece. Within Greece, it was difficult to develop centralized government due to the mountainous geography, which meant the use of city-states. Sparta and Athens were 2 major city-states in Greece, with Sparta being heavily military, while Athens used self-governing to create the first democracy. Although Athens did use democracy, it was not truly fair or equal, with only men being able to vote. As internal conflict grew, this eventually led to Alexander the Great's ability to conquer Greece. From there, he moved to conquer much more, and within his territory, he established cities and created unity throughout. But after his death, it was divided among his generals. Rome also had a massive impact and is a major reason for the time periods, with its rise and fall marking the second period. The Roman Republic began in 509 BCE, and all throughout there were political power struggles. And it used voting in a Senate form in which they had 2 consuls that acted as the head of the Senate. Beyond this, in an emergency, the Senate could appoint a dictator that would have temporary power. Their laws were held in the 12 tables and set a standard of justice with things like innocent until proven guilty. Throughout these 2 time periods, government grew and became more centralized, but along with this came problems, eventually leading to the fall of both early river valley civilizations and classical civilizations.